Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Gorman. I'm the Master Distiller here at Midleton Distillery, and I'm delighted to be joining you today from Warehouse 29. And this is one of 154 warehouse blocks that we have between our Midleton site and our site in Dungourney. Our Dungourney site is about 10 kilometres due northeast of here, and it's a wonderful location just outside the small village of Dungourney. And interestingly, the Dungourney River actually rises just adjacent to that new warehousing complex in Dungourney, and it makes its way all the way down here past our distillery in Midleton. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why the Murphy family founded this distillery in 1825, because the Dungourney River was adjacent to the site and they had an ample supply of water. So now we have a wonderful link between Dungourney and the site in Midleton through that beautiful river, the Dungourney River. So back here to Warehouse 29. So what I want you to do now, because we're in 360-degree virtual reality, I want you to take a really, really good look around the warehouse. Okay, so I want you to turn around, take a good look. I want you to look up, look down, look all the way around, and just take in the scene here in this incredible warehouse. And what you see here is 16,800 American bourbon barrels, all maturing and in the middle of their maturation cycle. It's a wonderful site. So what you see here is that you have 6 American bourbon barrels on each pallet, and those pallets then are stacked 7 high. So what goes on in this warehouse during the maturation cycle? So when I walked into this warehouse this morning, and you open the door, you get this aroma, the smells of the warehouse. What you have is things like toasted oak. You have wood shavings, a touch of vanilla. It just fills the whole atmosphere in this warehouse when you walk in. It's just amazing. You also get what we call evaporative losses here in the warehouse. And that's where water and alcohol molecules are evaporating from the casks over their life cycle of maturation. And this is what we call the angel share. So this is where we're losing ethanol to the atmosphere. And on a typical day here at Midleton, believe it or not, we lose up to 75,000 bottles of Jameson every day. That's 75,000 bottles a day through the angels. So as you can imagine, we have very, very happy angels here surrounding us in Midleton. So I have 2 examples of, I suppose, 2 very important casks that are so important in Jameson Original, for example, and Jameson Black Barrel. So on my left-hand side here, we have an American bourbon barrel, and on my right-hand side, we have an Oloroso sherry butt. So let's take the American bourbon barrel first. So this American bourbon barrel, it's made in Kentucky, generally Kentucky. It's made from American white oak, which is Quercus alba. It's 200 litres in capacity. And when they make the barrel, for example, in Kentucky, in one of the cooperages, they char the inside of the barrel. They basically set it on fire. And this charring process is really important in creating extra flavors that come from the wood. There's lovely vanilla, honey, toffee, fudge flavors. The sweetness is really important, that charring process. So in America, those casks then are seasoned with either bourbon or Tennessee whiskey for a number of years. They're then emptied, and we take those barrels back to Midleton here, and then we fill them with our whiskey. Okay, so then the maturation cycle begins. And the first time we use that cask, we call that a B1. So it's a bourbon barrel 1, which is our first fill. It's the first time we fill that barrel. And then we can use that barrel a second time, and indeed a third time. And the important thing here is that the difference between a first fill, a second fill, and a third fill. The first fill will have more wood compounds, it'll be a little more woody, it'll be a bit sweeter, you'll have a bit more vanilla and fudge and honey. And as it progresses to a second and third fill, that wood contribution will go down. However, their second and third fills, they also play a huge part in producing a balanced whiskey, in getting the balance right between distillate and maturation. So it's really, really important. Then on my right-hand side, we have our wonderful Oloroso sherry. So this is an example of a first fill Oloroso sherry butt. So it's made from European oak, which is Quercus robur, as opposed to Quercus alba. This one is manufactured in Jerez de la Frontera in a cooperage called Antonio Paez. So Antonio Paez, we've been working with them for well over 35 years now. And it's a wonderful partnership. So they make all our Oloroso sherry butts. So when they make the Oloroso sherry butt, they toast the inside of it. So this toasting process is a much gentler, lower temperature heating process in comparison to the charring of the bourbon barrel. Okay, so the inside of the sherry butt is toasted, and then after that process, it is filled with Oloroso sherry, and it's left for 2 years seasoning. And this Oloroso sherry then is allowed to penetrate into the staves. After 2 years, the Oloroso is taken out, and then they send the sherry butts back to Ireland, where we inspect them when they arrive, and then we fill them with our wonderful whiskey. And then I suppose the important thing here is the difference between the American bourbon barrel and the Oloroso sherry, not only in size and wood type, but also the flavor that you get from these. Typically, the American bourbon barrel will give you vanilla, it'll give you sweetness, it'll give you honey, maybe a touch of fudge. So that's the flavor that you get off the American bourbon barrel. In comparison, the Oloroso sherry, because of the contribution of the Oloroso and also the particular wood type, which is European oak, you get a lot of dried fruits, you get sultanas, raisins, and maybe a hint of a nutty note as well. So a very distinctive difference in flavor profile. And the other point as well is that the color and the tannins would be a lot higher from the European oak as well. So quite a difference between both. But these two barrels play such a huge part in our Jameson Original and our Jameson Black Barrel production. Now, I just want to show you two very important tools that we use here at Midleton. I suppose the question people ask is, well, how do you extract whiskey from a barrel for nosing or for assessment? And these two tools here, the first one is what we call a bung puller. And as you can see, it's like a very large corkscrew. And then we have what we call a valange, which is, I suppose, similar to a large pipette. And we use this for extracting whiskey from the cask. Okay, so this is the valange. So very simply what we do is we put in the bung puller and we extract the bung. Okay, and you can see the penetration of the whiskey here on the bung. And then we put in our valange. Just give it a bit of a stir. And again, like a pipette, you just fill the valange, and then we'll pour a sample of our whiskey like this. Okay. Okay, so this sample of whiskey here, this is in sort of mid-maturation cycle. It's similar to all these casks around here. It's beginning to take on some of the color and some of the flavor. And over the years, this will develop and you end up with a beautiful whiskey with a gold and amber color, full of flavor. So, in summary, let's come back to warehouse 29 again. In Midleton and Dungourney, we have 154 warehouse cells. And each of these warehouses hold about 16,800 barrels. So if you multiply that out, we have over 2 million barrels in storage between Midleton and Dungourney. Now, each of these barrels holds approximately 400 bottles of whiskey. So if you work all that out, that's about 750 million bottles of whiskey in storage here between our Midleton and Dungourney site. And as you can see, it's a staggering figure, but such is the demand for the most shared Irish whiskey in the world. That's what we need. So here we have our Jameson Original. So Jameson is a blend of grain whiskey and pot whiskey. So just to explain that briefly. So our grain whiskey comes from a mash bill of maize or corn and malted barley. And it's triple distilled in what we call column stills, these large vertical columns. And it comes off the third column at about 94% alcohol. And then the grain distillate, which really is, very fine, it's quite floral, quite herbal, is reduced down in strength to 70% alcohol. And then it's filled into a range of different types of casks. For example, the American bourbon barrels that you see around me here. So that's our grain distillate. Then our pot whiskey. So our pot distillate, that comes from a mash bill of barley and malt barley. It's triple distilled in copper pot stills. And it comes off the third still at about 84% alcohol. Then we reduce it down to 63%. And again, that's filled into a range of different types of barrels, okay, like the ones that you see around me here in this warehouse. So what Jameson is actually a blend of both of those together, the grain and the pot. Okay, so typically with grain whiskey, it's quite floral, it's quite elegant, and then the pot whiskey is more robust, it's more spicy, and really Jameson is a combination of these two together. We also use two different barrel types in Jameson Original. We have the American bourbon barrel, which I have here alongside me on my left, and we also have Oloroso sherry on my right-hand side here. And again, those two different barrels contribute different flavors, and that's so important in putting together the makeup of our beloved Jameson Original. So, it's time for a taste. Okay, so let's pour a drop of Jameson. Okay, so the first thing you do with any whiskey tasting is you just observe the color. Okay, it's a wonderful golden color. Okay, just around the glass. And then we're going to have a nose, and I'm going to nose and taste this whiskey at its bottling strength, which is 40%. And then after a while, we'll add a drop of water, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. So just have a nose. So, has a wonderful aroma coming from the Jameson Original. Here you have the grain whiskey and the pot whiskey working together. So from the grain whiskey, you have these wonderful, what I call floral notes. It's almost like summer flowers, maybe a touch of herbal. You then have lovely vanilla, touch of fudge and toffee, particularly coming from the American bourbon barrel. Then you also, if you go a little bit deeper, you have maybe a little bit of dried fruit, a touch of nutty aromas coming from the Oloroso sherry contribution. And it's all these wonderful notes coming together. The vanilla, the fudge, the spices, maybe a touch of cinnamon, nutmeg, the fruit, maybe a little bit of ripe apple, orchard fruit. And it's really just coming together in perfect harmony. So we'll have a taste. Launch it. So you take your sip of Jameson, then you roll around, and initially you get some beautiful sweetness. You get the toffee, the fudge, maybe a touch of butterscotch. And then you get this lovely, luscious fruits. A touch of orange peel, some sort of ripe berries. It's a really, really luscious taste. Then it goes back to maybe caramel, a little hint of creme brulee, some nice spices, nutmeg again, and the whole thing just comes together wonderfully. So we're just going to add a little touch of water. So I invite you maybe to, if you wish, to add a little drop of water. Just give it a bit of a stir, rotate the glass. And what happens is when you add water, by lowering the alcohol, it allows some of the other aromas, some of those flavor compounds to be released, particularly esters and some of those fruity compounds. Because of the lower alcohol, they're allowed to express themselves in the release. So when you go back to it again, for me, the fruit is becoming even more dominant. Very fruity, ripe apple, the orchard fruits, melon, orange peel, mandarin. It's really, really nice. And then you have rolling vanilla and fudge and toffee. Okay, so we'll have a taste. Sláinte. Beautiful. Again, at that strength, the caramel and the fudge is really, and butterscotch is wonderful on the mouth. Very luscious, very, very smooth. So really, really good. So there you have it, the Sir Jameson Original. It is the most shared Irish whiskey in the world. It's triple distilled, it's super smooth. It has a balance of flavors where you have the American barrel, you have the Oloroso sherry, you have the grain whiskey, and you have the pot whiskey coming together. And it's the synergy and the balance between all these that gives you this super smooth, triple distilled, incredible Jameson Original.